Hello, my name is Neil Potter and I have been a coach and a consultant to software organizations for over 30 years and a coach to Agile teams since the year 2000 when Agile started to become popular. This video series is about going beyond the basics of Agile software development. In this video, I will discuss the problems of Agile teams becoming overcommitted, or in other words, being committed to more work than they can do. Please click below to subscribe for future videos. Overcommitment can be positive and cause people to stretch and grow. It can also lead to embarrassment, disaster, rework, and financial loss. Given that there's a large range of outcomes, great teams are very careful when they make commitments. Let's look at some common causes and a few typical solutions. So firstly, two situations that may come up in your team. Someone committed you to a deadline, for example, customer or boss. I will call them the requester. Or secondly, you or the team committed to a deadline. These ideas I'm going to share work in both situations. The first common cause I would call a single response. The team sees no other options more than saying yes. Or they give up to whatever the demand is and hope for forgiveness later on. The team may have been beaten down over the years or months, or when they used to say the word no, then they got beat up, or it didn't go so well. A lot of teams get into a routine of just kind of agreeing to things, maybe hoping it will work out in the end. The second common cause of being overcommitted is what I would call fact-free. In this example, no data are used to evaluate the commitment or the amount of overcommitment or communicate the risk of being overcommitted. So for example, the team gets a deadline request and they have a hunch they can do it. It sounds okay. They don't know for sure they can or cannot do it, so they kind of say yes. So they believe that the deadline is okay or easy enough to be able to achieve. But then the work starts and they get into trouble. Maybe they find there's more work than they had planned for, or the things that they thought were done or finished are not done or finished yet. So they start to kind of panic or get into trouble by being overcommitted. So these are two common examples of why teams end up in a chronic state of being overcommitted. Let's look at some example solutions for how this can be managed. The first thing I would note is that really good teams have a toolbox of skills they can employ to respond to the request. It would be nice if the requester, the manager, or the customer basically insisted that we have these skills, or the requester actually had good data to know if the deadline was achievable or not, but that isn't how it actually is. Typically, the customer and the manager are doing their own activities and they really have no data to support the deadline request they're making. So the onus becomes on the team to really figure out what they can do and what they cannot do and have data to support that. So in the team's toolbox, they may have many tools or many skills, being able to check capacity of their team, their availability, and calculate that, risk management, estimation, and negotiation skills, among others. So although it would be nice if the customer manager or the requester didn't expect us to have these skills, actually in reality, really good teams employ them to keep themselves out of trouble and make sure things work correctly on the project. So here are some examples of what can be done to respond to a deadline request. Firstly, I would say at least provide 3 options, and each one being achievable. So for example, the request comes out to have features A, B, and C done by a deadline. But A, B, and C may not be achievable by the deadline. So we have to have some data to support that. The first piece of data is having some options of what can be achieved to present that back to the requester. I would say at least 3 options. Option 1, we're able to create and deliver feature A way before the deadline. Maybe that keeps the customer happy and productive by getting a feature early on. Maybe option 2 is to have A and B and C done by the deadline with an extra resource, or with a simpler solution, some other modification that makes A, B, and C achievable by the deadline. The second part of this is to stand your ground with your data. A, have some data, and secondly, actually use the data to put your ideas forward. For example, if they don't like your options, ask them what scope can be changed, not how you can cut the estimates down to bare bones and end up being overcommitted. Would they like a prototype being delivered early on? Would they prefer to wait for a production version with fewer defects? Would they like a mock-up of the whole flow to see how you plan to achieve it, so they can kind of envision the solution? If the solution is ambiguous, have you clarified the scope of that ambiguity? For example, they're saying, deliver me it by the deadline, and it is poorly defined. Maybe we can define it better and clarify on both sides now what the features actually are and how they should work, what platforms should be part of that feature set. Under the items of fact-free, we need to clarify the need. If the customer had the system now, what would they use it for? Would they use every feature? Are there options in there that can be maybe changed to be simpler or easier to build or quicker to build that would still meet the need but have a different deadline with that? Also have estimates. Look at hours, dates, story points, velocity, team capacity, a range of the deadlines, so we have a range of what can be done, and provide that data back to them. So we have to have some data to substantiate our claims and basically earn trust with the other side. And the last one I would say is conscious negotiation. Both parties agree to the commitment based on data, and they agree to the risk of being overcommitted, and they both help develop mitigation actions to reduce the impact. So for example, if you believe a feature will be late or will have problems, how could that be avoided? Extra expertise, another skill, a training course for the team, working with the customer earlier on to get more feedback, maybe playing the day in the life of the user so we understand fully kind of what they had in mind, looking for vendor solutions that we could plug in to kind of keep them happy, maybe not building the whole thing ourselves. And then secondly, actions that could be taken to reduce the impact of risk if we do get a problem in what we build, or it's later than they want, what is our backup plan? And then if we do this, we have to remind people. They may forget what we promised, they may forget what the risks were, they may forget the mitigation actions. All these items that we come up with, like risk estimates, etc., have to be presented and people continually reminded. They tend to kind of forget what could go wrong or what the surprises could be that we elicited at the very beginning. In conclusion, making initial commitments and responding to requests needs to be done with data, options, and an assessment of risk. This requires skill in estimating, scoping, risk management, and communication. I hope I have given you some ideas on how to manage your team's commitments. Look at your next deadline and see if you have data that supports it. And if you are overcommitted, have you assessed, mitigated, and shared the risk? For more help on these topics and your Agile implementation, please see the links below and hit subscribe for future videos.